I have a great deal of respect for Ron Paul, and in no way is this a paid endorsement of his book, but I do recommend it.
Washington every week from Bowling Green, Kentucky, where I live, and then I return at the end of the week, and I've been married 33 years as of last week. And I get home and I think, when I knock on the door, my wife lets me in, I think, well, she'll have my slippers, maybe a hug and a kiss, maybe a martini. And you know what I usually get when I get home? I open the door and you know what she says to me? How come Anthony Fauci's not in jail yet? But it's not for lack of trying. I've referred him twice to the Department of Justice, but there is this guy over there, the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, who may be the most partisan Attorney General we've had.
Well, that's very telling, isn't it? Let's listen to more.
There used to be some sense of distance between the Attorney General and presidents in politics, but I think there is no longer. And we have the proof. We'd submitted the proof. Essentially, Anthony Fauci, in his own words, has admitted the truth. He lied in Congress, which is a felony, and we have the proof. It's in his own emails. It's in his own words. But if you look back in time and you want to know when the cover-up began, when the conspiracy began.
The cover-up and conspiracy theory begins. It
really began January 31st of 2020. The virus had only been out a couple weeks in China. The Chinese were still saying, oh, it's not transmitted between humans. This was months after the virus had really erupted. We know now that the virus started in the lab, that the first 3 people sick, we actually know their names, worked in a lab in Wuhan. They worked for Dr. Shi, the one they call the great bat scientist. The first patient 0 they actually think is Ben Hugh, a scientist who worked for her. We know that because they declassified that in the Trump administration.
President Trump's administration declassified the information and made it public. It's an important thing to notice.
They declassified that these 3 were sick. The x-ray findings were consistent with COVID. There wasn't a test for COVID. They had a test for the first SARS-1, the one that was the pandemic back in 2003 and 2004, but they didn't yet have a COVID test. But they had all the signs and symptoms of it. Will we ever prove they had it? Well, we could have early on in the disease if they'd come forward and admitted the truth and subjected serum for antibody analysis. We could have proved that they were the first patients. But all of the evidence points to that. We know the Chinese were dishonest in their death count. All likelihood, millions of people died in China, and yet there was no real accounting for that.
If you value our content and the pursuit to report the truth, please go to realmustangmedic.com and find out how you can support this effort. This will allow us to continue to offer our unbiased reporting if you share, comment, subscribe, and donate with that little heart button underneath the video. It supports us and it helps us grow this channel to get to the truth and get it out there. You're very much appreciated. Now back to the video.
I begin the book by talking about a young ophthalmologist, Leng Wang, who I say reminded me of myself. I was a young ophthalmologist a few years ago, and he was idealistic, and he saw the pandemic coming. He began reporting it. But in China, if you report the truth or reveal the truth, he was arrested. He was made to go through a struggle. He was made to shame himself and admit that he had been guilty of spreading gossip or guilty of spreading rumors against the state, and then he dies. We don't say how he died necessarily. He appeared to have died from COVID, but in his age group, the death rate's like 0.004%. So for him to die was extraordinary. If he did die from COVID, it was still extraordinary.
He died of questionable circumstances. Back to the clip.
But I recount at the beginning because this scene was so striking that as they were sealing people and entombing people in their apartments, like they did in the Middle Ages, only 3 years ago in China, as they were sealing people in their apartments, people just were so lonely and distraught that they were coming out on their balconies. You saw it in Italy, you saw it in different places. But the way they responded to it in China should send shivers up your spine. In China, they sent drones. And in the soothing voice of a woman, the woman would say, "Suppress your soul's desire to be free." That's how they were responding. And I think most of us can kind of believe that that's the way a totalitarian government would respond. But we think we're better. We think, gosh, our government, when we're we're a liberal democracy, we would certainly not react that way. But what we discovered, and what I discovered as I went through this, is that January 31st of 2020, the conspiracy began.
Are we headed this way? I really think we are. I really think so.
And it began in a flurry of emails. Emails between Anthony Fauci and other virologists around the world. Emails between Anthony Fauci and a guy named Jeremy Farrar, who's sort of the Anthony Fauci of England, maybe the biggest dispenser of grants in all of Europe. The emails have a harried nature. You know how you can read emails between people and you can get a sense of that they're worried. You also get a sense that they're worried because they go on till 3 a.m. They go on through midnight. His assistants are emailing Anthony Fauci and saying, hey, we see this paper, it's from Wuhan, and it's gain-of-function research, and it looks like we funded it, but it never went through the safety committee. Mysterious. Never went through the safety committee, got approved, but we're unsure how that could have happened. The emails have increasing harried nature. You get to midnight, and Fauci's responding to his assistant saying, there will be duties, have your cell phone on, be up early, I will have duties for you in the morning. At 3 a.m, Fauci sends an email to somebody named Bob Kadlec. I didn't know who that was at the time. In fact, I didn't know that for a year or two till we were well into the book, and then I met Bob Kadlec. Bob Kadlec was the head of the safety committee. But just like government is, and just like government screws up so many things, the safety committee's secret. The name of the people that are supposed to review dangerous pandemic research so we don't create a pandemic is secret. The people on the committee are secret, and so are their deliberations. I still have never seen their deliberations. But one thing I do know is only 3 grants were ever looked at, and none of them were the grants in Wuhan.
No grants to Hunan, China were looked into.
3 grants were looked at. But the email from Fauci to Bob Kadlec at 3 a.m. says this, hey, here's an interesting article, and it looks like it came from animals. All the evidence looks like it came from animals. Nothing to see here. Why is he doing it? He's CYA. He's covering up because he knows that he was involved with funding this. Was this an accidental thing? Was this something Anthony Fauci just made a mistake, a judgment, and well, we didn't get it reviewed? No, it's a lifelong philosophy for him. Because really the whole discussion and the debate over gain-of-function research where you take 2 viruses and combine the genetics of them to create something that doesn't exist in nature, that is potentially more dangerous, more lethal, or more contagious. This has been going on for a decade. It started with a famous research of the avian flu in the Netherlands in 2010. The avian flu, if you've ever seen when they have the reports in the news of killing of millions of chickens in primarily China, but other places, it's very contagious among chickens, but like most animal viruses, not very contagious to humans. But when it infects humans, it kills about 50% of the humans it infects. It's a bad disease.
It kills 50% of the humans. 50%. This is obviously something to be very concerned about, right? I think so.
But like most animal viruses, it's adapted for its host, for chickens, for birds, and it's very transmissible. So a research in the Netherlands said, wow, wonder if we take the avian flu and we give it some mutations, if we could make it contagious through the air to mammals. And lo and behold, he did that. But people became alarmed. They're like, wow, this could be a recipe for terrorists to create something that could, kill off 50% of the population. And they debated over whether to publish it.
This could be a recipe for terrorists.
Because they thought it could be a roadmap for terrorism. So the debate goes back and forth, and on one side are the good guys, and there are many of them you'll learn about in the book who are scientists, who are credentialed at many of the prestigious universities, and yet they were very worried about this. On the other side, Anthony Fauci and all of his colleagues that helped him in the cover-up. And Anthony Fauci actually says in 2012, he says that even if a scientist were to become infected, even if a pandemic were to occur from gain-of-function research, that the knowledge would be worthwhile. I would venture to say that the people who lost loved ones in COVID would probably disagree with him.
The knowledge of all these facts are very important for us to be vigilant and looking into anything that might be popping up in the near future. We need to protest, We need to contact our congresspeople, our senators, and not stand for it, because they are not going to repeat what they did in 2020. We have to be very careful. The Democrats are getting very, very desperate, and anything's possible. But the most important thing is that we don't sit on our butts and we actually call it out for what it is. We unite and we push against this. We cannot sit on our butts again. We can't do it and run around scared. We've got to attack the information that we're receiving and keep people responsible. This is William Wieting from MustangMedic reporting. Thank you for watching on this very serious matter.